We can kick things off. Oh, okay. There we go. Um, no, excited for this session. This is part of the Prepare for VC um, catalyst and training program for early stage tech entrepreneurs. We're excited. Christina, I've known you for a while through the Boston tech events and startup scene, and was excited to connect and be a part of the your DBM's legal training and tech training program for technology startups. And Jonathan, same as well. Yeah, we had great conversations. Excited to share all of your knowledge and expertise with our tech community through Prepare for VC and Boston New Technology. And yeah, really excited for today's workshop on the introduction to Web3 and legal considerations for startups. So I'll kick it over to you. And then yeah, I'll manage any chat that comes in as well.
Sure.
And yeah, I'll be kind of in the background connecting with our startup community as well. But yeah, excited to hand it over to you to kick things off for today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jason. So, hi, everyone. My name is Christina Liebert, and I am one of the senior partners over at Duncan Bergman Dell. I'm also a co-chair for our entertainment, sports, and media group. I am an IP attorney of God, almost 12, over 12 years now, working with startups, great and small, and working within small to large corporations, nonprofits, etc. So I'm really excited to get on to talk about one of the great topics that I find really fascinating that's going on in the legal world, and which I also think you guys find fascinating in the startup world. My partner, Jordan Denning, who couldn't be here today, is also my co-chair for this entertainment, sports, and media group. However, majority of our attorneys have a passion for startups. A little bit more about DBM really quickly is that while we have started in 2021, we are seasoned attorneys across the board with well over 100 years worth of experience in aggregate. We use technology to really eliminate overhead. We are a group of attorneys that are all over the US, and we're able to really provide really key information and services to our clients, and it's really hands-on. So here's a quick view of our legal offerings. Startups obviously being at the top, but we also do a fractional GC work, where if you do need someone to have on the side to work with you directly with your business, we're able to do that alongside with many different offerings here. If you're interested, please do contact me or myself or Jordan or anyone really at the firm if you're interested in more of that. However, I know you're really here for the good stuff, which is intro to Web3. So I'm going to start off by first saying, I know legal can be dry, and I start off with every webinar that I do, is that I'm going to try to make it as sexy as possible. However, stay with me. We'll get through the nitty-gritty, and hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have a better understanding of what Web3 really is, where we are with this new iteration of the internet, and how you can begin to integrate Web3 into maybe your startup idea and how to hedge against any potential risk. So let's start off with Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. What was that first? What the F is Web 3.0? So when we talk about Web 1.0, we're talking about the very first interaction of the internet that was outside of an academic setting. So we think back to the days of the 90s, and we're thinking about Netscape and the Internet Explorer and AOL. That was the very first iteration where users of the internet were able to freely use and create websites, to create content for their own purposes. And it was very free flowing. It was very new. Everyone was just trying to begin to understand what exactly is the internet. Then we get to Web 2.0, which was the very next one, which where we really are currently right now, which is the interactive and social web. So it is really where companies have now become to dominate what the internet has come to be. Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitters, or X, have now become decentralized players in amassing your personal data, our personal data, in exchange for free services. In exchange for that, they are now using it as a marketing tool, making and amassing much money from the uses of the data they've been able to collect over the years. However, the problem with that, as everyone has come to realize, along with many congressional hearings and rules coming down the pipeline, is that there's no check and balances for how that data moves, who is looking at that data, where is that data living, and whether that data is being changed without our permission. So the ethos for this new iteration of the internet is understanding that we as consumers need to have the right to our own information and our data. We need to have the right to rule over our own content and to be able to benefit from that content, and that no one person or one company should have control over all data and internet usage, and that the community itself should be able to come together and set its own rules. So with that, it's the community as the holders of the data, which is the blockchain, are collectively putting value towards projects that they believe in. So that could be cryptocurrency, that could be DAOs, that could be NFTs and tokens. And we don't need to share our personal data in order for us to get valuable services. So in essence, the web has now become from a centralized control to a decentralized usage, where each user manages their own information and data in what they call a wallet, or a software that allows you to be in control as to when your data is being released or not. So blockchain technology is a database that's not singly managed by one person or entity. It's managed by multiple people, making it a peer-to-peer database. And so the way that we're able to share that information across to different people along this network is in an encrypted way with checks and balances across the board to make sure that the data that's being sent is true and has not been tampered with. And so it's a very complex parameters and network systems that allows it fundamentally for any transaction that is done on the blockchain to be free from corruption or free from change. You might have heard of many different kinds of public blockchains. We have Ethereum, we have Polygon, we have Solana. There are many others that are being created to this day. What you may not know is that there are already private blockchains that are being used. What you might see actually currently right now is within the healthcare industry that they're beginning to implement the usage of private blockchains to protect their internal information. Some companies that are now offering these services is Hyperledger and Corda. So how does this work? It really depends on what they call a smart contract. So a smart contract is a few lines of code that's instructed to run on a set of commands upon a set agreed conditions between two parties. Now, in a nutshell, what that means is that in the same way that you have a contract with a particular person to do X, Y, and Z, in the much more traditional sense, a smart contract will initiate regardless of whether you are able to do so or not. If you press the button or not, it will be automated. And so what that does is it builds trust amongst others that if these conditions on both sides are met, so let's say if I'm going to sell you a picture for $50, the smart contract will determine as to whether you have the $50 or not available. And if they're both true, that they see I definitely own on my side that picture and you own the $50, then the contract will be immediately executed. It saves money and it also speeds up the process. So it's able to enforce agreements automatically whenever those conditions are met and there's no contract tampering. So there are many different uses that are being initialized right now. So in terms of voting, trading stocks, buying insurance, buying a new house, using as an escrow, enforcing contracts between suppliers, many different uses right now that we're still trying to understand the ramifications of this. But it's very interesting right now. And so the way that now Web3 is moving forward is moving away from what we're calling traditional and centralized money systems. Because much of that is necessitated on the fact that we're still using centralized systems, centralized owners of this information, the data that is called fiat. So what blockchain relies on is cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency is digital money with no physical form. It is independent of any bank or government. And so as we're moving in from a decentralized system, we're moving to decentralized money system as well. And so on the blockchain, what appears on there is what we call coins and tokens. And sometimes people use them interchangeably. However, they really do have separate meanings. So with cryptocurrency or coins, they do reflect a stored value, much like fiat, much like, you know, what we consider traditional currency, like a dollar or yen, euros, etc. Digital coins are meant to be a form of money. However, tokens are meant to be something that can be assigned a price, but it could be simply more of a representation of price. It could be ownership, or it could be something that denotes a particular piece of value. A lot of times tokens are actually used for something like memberships or loyalty points, something that can be easily traded for without too much programming, machinery, money, or organization. Creating a digital coins is very intensive. However, a token can be really created by anyone, really, who has a computer, who I created my tokens myself. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to issue out. A lot of times what you will see tokens being used by companies who are using it for a very restrictive use. Let's say, for instance, you are creating a loyalty program for travel, and you wanted your users to be able to continue to use it as form of loyalty points. And the more loyalty points they're able to amass, then you as a company are able to now assign a price or assign a value to the amount of tokens that they've been able to create. They would not be able to use those tokens outside of the very restrictive use that you have set aside about it. So you can't use your loyalty points for, let's say, Expedia loyalty points. It's not really interchangeable. So that's the difference between really cryptocurrency and tokens. And this is how we are moving alongside in the blockchain. Now, what you might have also heard probably a lot, something called NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. These are different from regular tokens in that they are a unique digital asset. And that could be really of anything. It could be a picture, it could be music, it could be books, it really could be anything, but it's a very unique asset that really cannot be replicated. And why it's so interesting on the blockchain is that you're able to store information to prove the authenticity of this particular asset. You can trace it back to who created it, and what are the value or the benefits that are derived from this particular NFT. So I'm sure you've probably seen the Bored Ape pictures that you've probably seen all over the internet. That is a perfect example of what an NFT is. They have created a set number of these images. They're very unique in their sense. They have different attributes to each picture. However, with each one, there cannot be a replica of that because you know exactly who made that NFT. You're able to immediately trace it back. You cannot duplicate that without knowing that it did not come directly from the Bored Ape group. That's the power of the NFTs in and of itself. If you are trying to release or give out different assets, there are different kinds of NFT that have been used so far. One of them being digital art, limited prints. Some people are using it for galleries and exhibitions. They're using it for digital clothes. Prada, if I remember correctly, Prada decided to release their own version of NFTs with a very limited edition rendition of a bag that they were selling. And so that became a limited edition that they wanted to sell through their own fashion line. Wearables in the metaverse. That's a whole nother conversation to have about what exactly the metaverse is and how you can begin to use that. Maybe we'll do a whole nother talk about that. Like I said, community membership cards for music. We've seen artists begin to use NFTs as a way to really find out who their true fans are. And by having the NFT, now they gain access to special areas, special events that artists are doing. Allows you to also get to different kind of merchandising, or even potentially even revenue sharing. There have been some artists who have, at the beginning issued out particular NFTs, and those who own those NFTs, by being part of, let's say his super core fan group, are able to now receive a little bit of revenue sharing from whatever he collects. He collects a pool of money, and therefore now these particular NFT holders are now able to hold and receive some money he sets aside for them. I mean, there are many things you can do, particularly with travel. You definitely have seen that with tours. The city of San Marino decided to issue out their own version of NFTs during the pandemic to show that those people who had passed their COVID-19 testing, as a way to ensure that that particular person, this particular NFT was issued to this person to ensure that people weren't not trying to sell their results. Again, different opportunities there to use it. So what the benefits of the blockchain really is the true mediator, really, in every sense of the word, for any transaction that we make. And why? Because it builds trust. It creates a clear record of every transaction and ensures that that transaction, that data, is not manipulated in any way, shape, or form. It has enhanced security because of the encryption. There's transparency, it's immutable, and it's efficient in transaction, probably just as efficient as any transaction that would be passed on the MasterCard or Visa, the Visa transaction system. There are blockchains that are probably maybe even faster. Well, perhaps really just as fast. Some use cases would be personal identity security. Like I mentioned, for the city of San Marino, it was a way to ensure that the identity of those who have already passed for COVID tests were issued to the right people, and that those could not share it. For medical data, it would be to ensure hospitals within the same system are making sure that the information set to particular people are assigned to the right people. You would not believe how many hospitals sometimes make mistakes in putting the wrong information into the wrong chart. This would ensure that information that is set to one particular person is set to that one person and is continued throughout the course of the hospital system. Same thing with supply and logistics systems. If you're ensuring that, again, you're not losing out on supply chains or things going through supply chains, every checkpoint is made. You can make sure that those who are supposed to receive certain items get to those person items because the blockchain has determined this wallet or this particular person needs to have this particular item. And anti-money laundering or AML tracking systems. It's a great system to ensure that every transaction or those individuals who should not be transacting on a certain blockchain is now monitored and can be tracked to ensure that they're not receiving money from others that they should not be. However, as much as I made this sound so amazing, there are still challenges to the blockchain. First would be scalability. We are still truly at its infancy. We are just getting really to the point where people are becoming a little bit more interested and comfortable with blockchain. There's still much to do, unfortunately. The uses of how to authenticate in terms of ownership still is an issue because those who maybe are just beginning to get comfortable with blockchain don't necessarily understand how to keep themselves safe. So perhaps they're sharing wallet information, which then opens them up to potential hackers. Even the ease hasn't really been fully addressed yet. And there are people who are working on this currently right now to try to make it more accessible to others. However, because of that accessibility issue, it does tend to hinder the scalability of blockchain right now. The energy consumption issues, because of the fact that we are peer-to-peer, that means there are computers running every day, every hour of every minute across the world. And there have been many issues, fairly, about those with green initiatives who want to ensure that we are not simply using up energy for the sake of using it. And then now we're also getting to regulatory concerns. Because of a few bad actors who are using blockchain for nefarious reasons, it is called for more regulatory actions to be taken to ensure the protection of consumers and also really investors. But we're going to go more into that a little bit later about how to de-risk yourselves when trying to deal with these regulatory issues. So these are the challenges for blockchain. However, it does not stop the fact that this is ripe for opportunities for startups. And so let's go over a couple different industries. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but some ideas to begin to bring forward to you. So in the entertainment industry, like I said, I think I mentioned that I am also an adjunct professor who teaches entertainment and IP. There have been a lot of discussions about how we can begin to use blockchain to mitigate some of the problems that we have, long-standing problems that we've had in the industry. First being copyright management. So if we're able to include blockchain in our process, it could create an immutable record of managing copyright ownership to ensure that creators continue to maintain control of their work. A lot of times you'll hear of people pitching ideas, and before you know it, they've lost the idea to somebody else, maybe who had deeper pockets and better connections. Having that kind of system will allow you to manage those ideas and the actual copyrighted materials to ensure that the creators continue to have their control over their work. The second idea would be content distribution. We have a lot of intermediaries who are really cutting in to lines between creators and consumers. So creating a platform that is decentralized allows creators to distribute their content directly to consumers and also retaining more revenue. The fan engagement is definitely an opportunity for companies to do that. Disney has already started on using NFTs and experimenting with that to create, unique collectibles, exclusive content, and enhancing that fan engagement that could be there, which could also open up a new revenue stream. And another idea would be for royalty payments. So smart contracts could automate royalty payments rather than creators fighting for the percentages that they have already been promised through traditional contracts. It could ensure that all stakeholders are being compensated promptly and fairly. So some startups to even look at on your spare time would be Audius and also Mogul Productions. Audius is a new music system where allowing creators to come in, upload their music, and then again being able to engage with their fans much more directly than maybe through like an Apple Music or through a Spotify. Mogul is for film to allow creators again to have better access to the consumers directly, and again maintain more ownership and more revenue that's coming in from their work. Within finance, this was probably where you have seen probably the most movement currently right now with blockchain. First would be DeFi or decentralized finance, offering services like lending, borrowing, trading without traditional banks. And by doing so, can increase access and reduce costs with cross-border payments. Blockchain has already shown the ease in which we now can do transactions between countries with an ease of a button, eliminating really third parties and reducing transaction fees, of course, depending on what blockchain you're using, but that's another conversation. The tokenization of assets. So assets, physical or digital, can be tokenized, which means that it can allow for fractional ownership And by doing so, now you can increase liquidity for particular items that can be offered onto a market. We're already seeing this in a perfect example actually would be Robinhood, where they've already tokenized in essence stocks, where now you're able to add or to purchase a fraction of a stock in order for you to again to participate within the stock market. And then another example would be again for insurance to automate claims through smart contracts for insurance services. So great examples would be Compound and Ripple. They are very active, and they've been active for many years now, really for a couple of years, within the DeFi process of again just within the financial services. Within the healthcare industry, again, one thing that we have already discussed is about securing patient data, ensuring the privacy of that information, and sharing medical records. Speak 1 second. With drug supply chain to ensure that pharmaceuticals from manufacturing delivery can be tracked effectively to combat selling counterfeit drugs. And then telemedicine to decentralized platforms to allow for more secure telemedicine services that is on the rise currently. I will also give you a little tidbit, definitely in the US, the rise of medi-spas is growing in the sense that those who are looking for services not only by doctors, but also by those who are medical adjacent, to provide those services together, which are medi-spas, to ensure that facility, if you incorporated blockchain within that facility, you'd be ensuring patient data confidentiality. Some interesting startups here would be Burst IQ, which is working on the patient data systems, and also Novo Nordisk, which is also working on a system both with patient data, but also for telemedicine services. The last one thing I'm going to go into is also real estate. So real estate, again, has already seen some movement in how they can begin to use blockchain to streamline property transactions. I can say that a lot of the systems that we have right now in the traditional sense are quite antiquated. We're talking about systems that have been in place for, well, we have records that go back almost 100 years, depending on where you are in the world. So a way to streamline those property transactions would be to move those documents really to the blockchain, again, making them immutable, reducing potential fraud, and ensuring that if there is the desire to tokenize real estate assets, that you're able to refer back to that, to the paperwork transactions of these particular real estate assets to ensure they're accessible to a broader audience. And it begins to create a tamper-proof registry, which I'm absolutely all for. So a Republic has already started in creating a system that will ensure that any offering that they have on their platform that does include real estate has been completely up to par. Another one would be Real Blocks, which again, trying to tackle the issue of property transactions. So there's a lot that I mentioned there, and there are many things again that are just that are beginning to happen within the world of Web3. There's a lot of camaraderie, I will say, within those who are creating Web3, because again, they really want to see this new iteration of the internet come forward. So with this new fervor, however, there are some legal considerations we have to consider. So let's talk about regulatory compliance, which is a harsh word sometimes the startup founders don't really want to hear. However, there's the nature of the beast. Because when you begin to include investors and consumers into your product, there's always going to be a regulatory body that's going to want to ensure that what you're doing is up to par. And so if you are doing things up to par, this really should not scare you at all. It really should be maybe an additional step to consider as you continue your operations. So the first thing would be the legal status of smart contracts. This has not really been adjudicated yet to their enforceability. And because of that, there's still a question as to whether a smart contract would be enforceable in a traditional court. We don't have Web3 court yet. And maybe we will get there at one point, but we don't have a Web3 court per se. So they're looking at traditional contract law and to make sure that that would apply to agreements executed in code. We're still trying to clean up that debate. AML, so your anti-money laundering and KYC has already become a barrier for some companies that were beginning before this new rule or this rule became applicable to them. Because everyone was just transacting with each other, regardless of where or who they were transacting with. Unfortunately now, AML and KYC in the US is a rule that Web3 companies have to apply by. These regulations require you to verify the identity of your users and to monitor transactions for suspicious activity, which means those individuals who should not be transacting within the US, if you're a US-based company, needs to be monitored very closely. The other main point would be data protection and privacy. Now, the idea being is that you as a Web3 company should really only gain access to a user for a very limited amount of time. However, there are still Web3 businesses that are still collecting and processing user data. So with that, there are data protection and privacy laws that come into play, which you might have heard of, GDPR, which is the European version of, look, GDPR came first really in 2018. And then since then, there are various states, there are about 13 different states that have enacted their own version of GDPR. And so businesses must also consider the issues when you are collecting information and what does that mean, where it's living, security, etc. Securities laws also need to be considered as well. So Web3 businesses that are issuing tokens are engaging into activities that could be considered securities. And this is very broad what I'm saying. I'm just going to give you a taste of it. It becomes a much more complex. You have to comply with relevant security laws. There are registration requirements and the restrictions as to who can invest. Intellectual property definitely is into play. So those who are creating or using content have to ensure that they're not infringing on anyone's existing IP rights. So you have to ensure that you're taking steps to protect your own IP and gaining licenses or permission from others to use content. It's amazing, I'll tell you right now, it's amazing how somewhat, for some reason, people forget that or have forgotten that since really the wake of Web3 companies coming into play. We've had a number of different IP issues that have come down the pipeline, particularly that I have worked on, that people just forgot that, you know, intellectual property still exists in Web3. And lastly would be the consumer protection. So businesses have to take the steps to protect consumers from fraud, from scams, and any risk associated with this new technology. So you have to be clear about the risk and also the benefits of your product when dealing directly with consumers. So what to know? Existing laws that we've had before Web3 still apply to Web3 companies, regardless of their location. There are still global IP laws that still apply with copyright, trademarks, patents that are being instituted into Web3 solutions. The SEC is very interested in what is going on with cryptocurrency. So there's an escalation that's happened in 2003 and it's continued to grow in 2006. Sam Bankman-Fried should be a great example as to how much the SEC is getting involved right now, if you know what I mean. The EU has also begun to create a comprehensive framework as to how to deal with crypto assets. So this could lead to much more an increase in enforcement actions for EU-based companies. So I say all this to, again, keep your eyes open about regulations that are coming to address investor and consumer protection, but to ensure that you are building services or software or, you know, a business that keeps these regulations into play. So what are some best strategies and practices when you're moving forward with your ideas? Just understand what potential risk you might have. So with regulatory risk, the landscape is changing, it's evolving. So with that, keep your eyes open, stay informed, begin to follow SEC, the EU, you know, IP, GDPR, privacy, those kind of things still play into the operations of your startup. So the best way to do that maybe is to keep track of what those within the legal community are talking about who are specializing in Web3. A lot of them are having, you know, newsletters, trying to keep their own clients informed as to what to anticipate, and also work with them about developing maybe a compliance roadmap. Security risk. So if you are using smart contracts, you should know they are not they're susceptible to bugs. It definitely can happen, to exploits. We saw a couple of years ago a hacker pretty much disseminate a smart contract that had been used by thousands, and he essentially did a live and just showed where all the bugs were and showed how, you know, how trashy the smart contract at the time was. So they're able to do that. You should be using audits. There are third-party companies that audit smart contracts. You use the established frameworks that have been tried and tested, including their libraries, and then use best practice for coding. If you yourself are not a coder with smart contracts, please have somebody who is qualified to do smart contracts. It is not simply a thing to do to just go onto Fiverr or to go to any kind of independent contractor website to hire simply someone. It really is best to find someone who is qualified to do this kind of work. So for your operational risk, so if you are creating a blockchain solution, to develop of it can be complex and it's very resource intensive. From those who are working on it to the money that you're going to invest into it, to those who are going to be pushing it out for sales and marketing. Invest in skilled talent. Make sure that you're using blockchains. If you're using a public blockchain, I'm not even considering private one you might create from scratch, but use a public blockchain that has a great reputation, and again, implement robust testing and development processes. Market risk. Current cryptocurrencies, if you have been curious about them for the last couple of years, they're very volatile. There was a particular bull market that came through and then it fell apart, and it's very volatile, and impacts the stability of Web3 projects. So you need to diversify your funding, great contingency plans. And the best way probably to do that is consider stable coins, or what coins that have been pegged to fiat, particularly to ensure that the money is pretty much stable. So as close to a 1-to-1 would be able to reduce your exposure to the volatility. So some practical strategies: ensure that your smart contracts are legally sound. So when you're looking at the code itself, make sure that the terms and conditions are clear to everyone. There's not a question as to where things are going. There shouldn't be a secret line in there saying that with every transaction that happens, the platform, is getting a secret 3% off of the cuff. That should not happen. That should be very clear. And if you need to, integrate with traditional legal agreements where you need to. For IP protection, you can use blockchain to timestamp, to verify. You can ensure that executed agreements, both the smart contracts and in real life, so the traditional agreements, are on the blockchain and immutable. And again, please adhere to copyright, trademark, and patent ownership laws. With the regulatory landscape, just stay up to date. Create a process that by design can anticipate regulatory changes. And that was a main issue that a lot of Web3 projects had when the KYC ruling came down, is that they had not anticipated that these kind of rules would have to be put into place. So when you are designing a product, it'd be great to include legal counsel early enough to advise you about potential models and to ensure that you can put in place a modification if a new law or rule comes down. And when you're looking at the data itself, try to collect as little data as possible. If you're able to do so by design within the product, that it's simply maybe a check of the wallet or a check of the information that the user is giving you, and then immediately being able to pull back from that information. The best practice I can tell you as to what rule to follow, because there's so many different rules right now in terms of who could potentially be subject to it. So we have EU laws, we have the different state laws, there's a Brazilian law, there are new laws that are coming down on the eastern side. I would say find the strongest data protection framework and adhere that. So right now, I would say probably GDPR is probably one of the strongest ones out there because it was the first one. And then every single other have been a variation of that. GDPR probably will be your strongest one as of right now. And if you can, look at identity solutions that are decentralized. So that way, again, you're taking as little information from consumers as possible. So some general considerations, the things that you can take with you right now is just find an attorney who specializes in blockchain and Web3. And there are many attorneys who unfortunately say that they do, but have no true understanding of the actual technology. If you're able to find someone who actually can talk the talk and walk the walk, collaborate with them to absolutely create a roadmap in terms of what you should be prioritizing over the next maybe year, 2 years, 6 months, etc. Stay proactive, learn about your business model, the implications of your business model. What does it mean when you're trying to issue a token or you're trying to collect a coin? What kind of securities would be implicated with that? Data privacy issues, etc. Make sure to maintain open and transparent communication with your stakeholders. And that includes your investors, your users, and regulators who might be watching you as well. Make sure to provide clear information about your business model, about the technology, about what kind of compliance measures you'll be taking. Conduct risk assessments. So I always advise my clients to do at least a yearly risk assessment to determine as to where you need to make potential changes or to address potential legal and regulatory changes. If your roadmap for your product does not closely follow your risk assessment, then you're doing something wrong, because they really should be hand in hand with each other. And always think about the what ifs. So create those contingency plans to responding to any legal action, to any regulatory changes, and potential any unforeseen events. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. I will try to answer as much as I possibly can. And if you have none, I am definitely open to having conversations offline. Some of the things that we have at DBM are a solution, our business services as well. So we have everything from outsourced executives, advisory groups, family offices, human resources, marketing, executive searches, compliance, healthcare, etc. So we have quite a bit of different services available to you. And thank you very much.
Perfect. No, thank you for, yeah, great presentation here. And yeah, I do have one question I wanted to kind of get your thoughts and perspective on. And
Sure.
then, yeah, we can share with our community afterwards for additional questions. And yeah, appreciate you putting your contact in here as well. But yeah, basically, I don't know if I've shared this before, but one of my previous startups I was involved in was basically analyzing the token space. So it was around 2016 timeframe, and initial coin offerings
Mhm.
were really big. And the reason, basically it was around the time when startups were figuring out like, or basically the SEC didn't have a clear ruling yet on what's a
Mhm.
utility token versus what's a security token.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, How has kind of, over the last few years, a lot of that market changed in terms of, um, are companies, are you seeing mostly startups raising traditional equity rounds but offering tokens now more, or cryptocurrencies separately, or are they still doing token offerings? Where are you kind of seeing that shift today?
Well, it's interesting because depending on where the startup is founded, will have a totally different take on to what kind of strategy that they take. Those, I would say, those who are coming from the US definitely have relied more so on traditional offerings. So they're looking at the usual raising. They're not looking to do too much tokenization so far, because of the fact of the securities issue. And there are those who, I would say, very few now, just because again, I will say in the last couple of months, the last year or so, we're seeing more people being very cautious about offering tokens and relying more so on those. Now, those who probably have a much deeper pocket would then take the onset of actually going through a securities offering. We are seeing clearer rules come down, in terms of when we are doing security tokens, and they are looking at that royalty or for distributions to come through the tokens itself, having very clear indication as to how that's going to be. How are they doing the escrow part of it? How are they going to be controlling the funds from it? Who is going to have access to what? White papers being very clear as to how the process is going to do that. I mean, if they have the deep pockets and they have the ability to do that, they will go through the rigmarole of that process. However, I would say about closely like to 90% are still relying on now traditional raising.
Right.
And then because they're still being very cautious. And I think from an investor side, I think they prefer that now, due to the validity of the market, um, particularly those who are trying to raise their own coin. And in light of what has happened with Almeida and with Sam Bankman-Fried, they are very reluctant now to be issued coins that have no real true backing. So it's better for a startup really to look at a traditional raising, um, and to be able to give a centralized traditional view for investors to keep them, or to keep them on their side, versus questioning as to whether they're about to get the rug pulled out from underneath them.
Great. And yeah, last question here is at what point in the say, you know, ideation to development to launch process, should they be reaching out to a firm like yours and, getting help from yeah, partners, attorneys, legal perspectives on their business?
Yeah, I would say a sweet spot would be just probably right after you have found your market fit, that you have found some sort of um, equilibrium between the offering that you are doing, that this Web3 solution, and you have found the market that has definitely indicated to you that they're interested in, they want to participate. Because at that point now, you're going to be looking at increased usage. And depending on how many people are using the platform will then also begin to open you up for different regulatory issues like GDPR, or depending on how you're using tokens, if you're using tokens or you're issuing when I say tokens, I'm looking at utility tokens. How does that look within your system? At that point, it would be great at that point, before you begin to grow any bigger than that, to now have a conversation with council to say, okay, here's where we are. What do I need to do to ensure that I can get to the next phase? We're definitely seeing signs of growth. We're definitely seeing a month over month growth here. We are anticipating over the next 6 to 12 months, here's where our numbers are going to be. Where in our system do we need to address? And at that point, an attorney can go in, take a look at your roadmap, take a look at what white paper you've been creating for yourself, and begin to, analyze really as to where you're going, whether maybe you've already reached a threshold that you need to address first thing before you do anything else, and then create a roadmap for you to create a plan to ensure that you have longevity. And that's really the aim here, is to make sure you have longevity.
Perfect. No, that sounds like yeah, great plan. And no, really excited to, continue working together on additional
Absolutely.
webinars, events, and education for our network. And yeah, thanks again for spending all the time today and sharing great insights and perspectives. And again, for everybody watching afterwards, this is put on by both Prepare for VC and DBM, Duncan Begman Mendel. And we'll share additional follow-up resources to connect and answer any questions further. But yeah, thanks again for participating and watching. And thank you, Christina, for leading the session with us.
No, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.